back to this week's episode of Life in Private Staffing. Hope you're all well. As you know, my name is Philippa Smith from Silver Swan Recruitment, and we have different guests on here every single fortnight now. I keep saying every single week, every single fortnight, who have different types of careers within the private sector. So we get to see what everybody does, get different insights into different roles and what's available, and those potentially who are listening who are thinking about coming into the sector, it gives them lots of sort of inspiration as to what's available and what careers are out there and what they might want to do. So hopefully everyone's still finding this podcast interesting and of value. Today I'm looking forward to speaking with Jemma. We've got Jemma on the show today. Jemma's been a private tutor for a number of years now, and actually has her own company, an agency offering out tutors all over the place. So really keen to find out a little bit more about her background and how she's got to where she has and what she does today. So welcome to the show, Jemma. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No worries, no worries. Coming out of the pandemic, lots to talk about. I'm always keen to hear during the pandemic. Obviously, we started this at the beginning of the pandemic, and I always ask people how they're getting on the pandemic. It's actually a really nice conversation now because we are actually coming out of the pandemic and we're a little bit more positive about it. So it's not, I'm not fearful of the question anymore. How are you doing? I'm not scared you're going to cry on me or anything. But yeah, I'm really keen to find out, like, you've had a really cool journey and started doing nothing at university, nothing to do with tutoring, and then worked our way through. So let's go right back then. So you went to university, you didn't do anything to do with teaching. What did you do at uni?
So I went to University of Oxford and I studied biochemistry. So probably really far away from teaching or anything like that.
You know what? I absolutely bloody love it when I hear stories like this because I think I mentioned it before, my sister was similar. You go to university, I think so many 16, 17, 18-year-olds really stress out about trying to figure out what they want to do at uni because they're like, I don't know what I want to do in my career. Just, it doesn't matter. It really just, I think your experience of university and your experience of obtaining a degree, that's the experience rather than the subject you study. And obviously there are some paths you need, like law potentially, and if you would go down the medicine route, fair enough. I personally just picked my easiest A-level. I did. I was just like, right, I did maths, biology and business. Maths, not a million years. Biology, no. Business, common sense really.
There we are.
I thought, I reckon I could do the least amount of work at uni with this course. That was honestly my rationale before picking a thingy. So did biochemistry, you finished uni.
I did, yeah.
That's what happened.
Well, when I started biochemistry, I wanted to be a forensic scientist. That was the whole reason I went into it. I loved CSI. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And it very quickly became obvious that that was not what I wanted to do. Nor did I want to work in biochemistry. Nor did I want to do research. I actually spent probably my degree was a 4-year because I did a master's at the end of it. And I spent every summer doing a different job and realizing I didn't like it. So I'd been through auditing, I'd been through working for a big company, Procter & Gamble, who work in science. I'd been through research, and so I did what any Oxford grad would do, and I became a consultant because that was what offered the best starting bonus. And I thought, I've never lived in London, why not? You know, it sounds like it's a thing that I can do. And again, very quickly realized, probably in about the third day, I realized that wasn't the career for me. But by then it was too late. So I'd already started.
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes you've just got to roll with life, haven't you? Yep. And then you're start thinking, biochemistry must have been a mental degree to do as well. Like, that must have been so hard.
It was, yeah. I mean, I had a couple of bits that I was diagnosed as dyslexic at the end of my first year. Wow. And biochemistry has a lot of long words in it. Yeah. And the only reason that I was diagnosed was school hadn't picked it up because I was very good at skim reading and like filling things in. But the moment you hit biochemistry, you can't do that because every other word is long. So by the time I come out, I developed quite a lot of skills of kind of skim reading and processing, and also doing some analytical stuff. So it meant that strategy consultancy was something that I could do. It wasn't something that I enjoyed, I suppose.
So how long did you do it for then?
About 9 months. about yeah. And they said when we started, look, some of you will leave at the end of the first year, some of you will leave at the end of 3 years, and some of you leave at the end of 5 years. And I was like, I'm the first year. I'm definitely the person to leave.
I'll get my coat now if you want. Should we save us all a whole load of time? But you're in London by this point. You gave it 9 months. That's fair enough. And then, did you have any idea towards the end of the 9 months of any alternative career that you might want to do?
Yeah, so I'd started tutoring. I'd started doing it alongside strat consulting, which was probably the most ridiculous decision I'd made, because strategy consultancy in itself has about 60-hour weeks. And then I thought, I'll pop some tutoring at the end of that. So every weekend I'd go and tutor for a couple of hours. And I signed up with one of the top London agencies, and at Easter, and I remember it really clearly because it was Easter weekend, and I had been doing some tutoring on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And I came back into the office and I was like, this was great. I had a great weekend. Really enjoyed it. I was doing biomedicine for a first year student, and I came back into the office, and there'd been one of my colleagues who'd been there all weekend, and I kind of looked at him and went, that's what my life's going to be, and I don't want that to happen. So that was the point where I started to consider, well, is tuition something that I could do at least for the short term till I find myself something else. And that was pretty much the catalyst to leaving.
And like, I'm assuming that must have been quite a pay cut that came with that. You don't have to go into it, obviously, but I would have thought, I don't know.
Interestingly, yeah, it was, but I also moved back to Oxford at the same time.
Oh, fine.
So I was very lucky in where I was renting, and the lease had come to an end as well. So it naturally meant that I think I spent an extra month in London, and then I came back to Oxford where I'd done my degree, and also where my boyfriend was living. And that was actually really quite lucky, because I didn't get stuck down in London doing it. But it also meant that I moved away from London, which is where a lot of tuition is. Yeah. So I was back in Oxford and trying to work out, I suppose, what to do.
And the tuition that has it always been private tuition, even from the very beginning?
Yeah, from the very beginning. Yeah. So it's always been with private families. I wasn't doing anything residential back then. I was just purely doing hour-long or several hours over the Easter weekend. I think it was like sections of 4 hours, but that kind of tuition. Yeah, so that was what it was.
What ages and what subjects?
Pardon?
What ages of children?
Oh,
or adults even, and what subjects?
So I've niched as I've gone along. Now I only really deal with selective school entrance, which is 11 plus, 13 plus, 16 plus. Occasionally I'll take 7 plus, but they're not really my age range. I do GCSE mentoring, which is where I'll take students through the whole GCSE. So every subject, even though I don't teach every subject, I don't know Mandarin, but I can help you learn Mandarin because I can give you the tools to be able to do it. And then I do some Oxbridge entrance. So those are now my very specific parts. But back at that point, it was whatever, because that was how I wanted to get the experience, and anything that I thought I could do, including first year biomed, I did. So I would teach myself, and then I would go off and teach them.
You know what, like, I suppose this is probably why I like recruitment, because I find it fascinating, like how much there is to do and how many different jobs you can do and all the rest, and also like how many jobs are jobs that I just could not see myself doing. I would be the absolute worst tutor. I don't really like kids. I have a kid, he's all right, but I don't generally like kids. And I am the worst teacher. I haven't got any patience. I'm like, if you don't know what I'm thinking, like, nah. So the fact that you need to have all the patience under the sun, and also like specifically what you were saying, like having to learn the material yourself. Yep. I'm already dreading the day, like my kid's only 2.5. What happens if I can't do like his 8-year-old homework? Like,
you teach him how to do it. That's what I always say to parents, is put yourself on YouTube and let them see that you can work it out.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that they learn to work it out. otherwise they just expect you know the answer. So with my GCSE mentor students, I will say to them, no, I don't know everything about the League of Nations, because I'm not a history teacher. My degree was in biochemistry. My teaching degree when I went back was in secondary science. So I'm nowhere near history, but I can tell you how to find out, and I can tell you how to write an essay on it, and I can tell you how to memorize it. So let's work on that, because actually the knowledge is on the internet now.
It probably actually makes you a better teacher by not knowing, because my absolute downfall, and my team would be the first to, my Silver Swan team, the first say, I am way too quick to give answers all the time, just because it's quicker. So if someone doesn't know how to do something, I shouldn't just tell them how to do it. I should ask them how they think they should do it and what options they have and how they could go about finding the solution. I haven't got time for any of that. I'd just rather tell them the answer.
As a business owner, that's what I do. But as a tutor, I will spend time waiting for them to come up and discussing their answers. So two hats, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. And so you're back in Oxford. You're picking up as much work as you can via agencies, I assume. It's not, so it's a lot like ad hoc bits here and there. Like where did it evolve from there then?
So I took a bit of a roundabout route. I ended up working for, they're a summer school in Oxford, and by the time I came back it was summer, so I thought I'll sign up as a summer school tutor. Did a bit of tutoring for, they're called Oxford Royal Academy, and then at the end of it they were starting up a international study centre, so a full year residential study centre, and they wanted somebody to write the course for medicine, because that's what the first student was coming in. They only had one book at that point. And I wrote it, and the day I came to hand it over, they said, actually our centre manager has just announced he's leaving, will you take over? And this was new project, not set up. They had that one student, and so I did that for probably about 3 years. I got it to the point that there was about 30 students coming each term, so I dealt with the setting up of that, doing some tuition on the side, and again it was very in education at this point, and ended up as the head of this international study centre. I think I was probably about 22, 23 by that point. When I started, I think I was about 25 when I left. So a lot of responsibility, but an amazing learning experience, because I got the chance to grow a company inside an already existing company, which was the best way for me to learn. So I really am grateful for what that gave me, even though it took me probably another couple of years to go into full-time tutoring. The skills that I picked up that way were just invaluable.
And because you were young at the time, you've got all the time in the world. It's not like you're in your late 30s needing to get your career started or want to get your career started, anything like that. You know, you've got time to do whatever roundabout ways you want to do. And like I say, great skills, especially now, we'll talk about in a minute about how you've come on to have your own company, to have had a bit of a practice run at things that you need to know to run your company. I just wanged it the entire way to it. But, cool. So that was the 3 years, and then
from there, the day I left RA, I got on a plane and flew to Dubai. Because the original London agency that I'd been working for, they had an office out in Dubai, and they needed somebody to take on a 3-month role. And it was the first time I'd ever done an international tuition, which is now quite a bit of what I do without COVID. But yeah, so that was interesting, because again, that was a new piece for me. It was traveling out there. I saw several students, but I was with one student mainly, and helping him with his upcoming GCSEs. And I was in a completely different country, different place, again with a bit of support, because they had an office out there, so that was nice. But it was there that I realized, this is really cool. I really like doing this. It was also there that I did my PGCE interview, which would then take me another year whilst I did my PGCE to actually become a full-time tutor, because I was kind of at this crossroads of what do I do. And again, I took the teaching option because I thought maybe that's what I want to do. So it's, as I said, it's been a roundabout journey.
Yeah, but it just means that you've become, especially now doing your own thing, you've really all-rounded, because you've kind of touched on so many aspects within the sort of sector. Was that a live-in position out in Dubai? Did they give you accommodation?
It was live out. They provided accommodation. It was a bit of an unusual one, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice way of starting to doing it, because that's like a bit of a stepping stone as to, rather than a live-in position or a permanent position, or like quite hard, like heavy with one family all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's way more than just like an hour here and there with the kids in that.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
A nice little stepping stone. Was it a nice family? Was it an English family?
No, it wasn't. It was an Emirati family.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Did you 3 months?
Yep.
And then at the end of that, were you sort of thinking, this is what I want to be like, this is now what I want to be doing?
I realised I liked it, but I'd also liked running the study centre. And I had a mentor whilst I was there who said to me, if you want to go into education management, you want to go into anything like that, you should have a PGCE. So I'd applied to the PGCE at Oxford whilst I was out there. They'd accepted me. I kind of felt like, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. Yeah. So that was where I went then back to university and teaching in schools for the year, which was, again, great lessons, not what I want to do. So after that PGCE year was the point where I went, okay, I know what I want to do, and I know I've got the skills to do it, so now I can.
Yeah, I think a lot of them private tutors in sort of the governess route thing, people I speak to, like, often did start in schools and then realised probably how much more money they can make doing private stuff.
Yeah, it's also, for me, teaching 30 kids isn't the most ideal way of teaching. And I would always say that there's really great teachers who aren't great tutors, and there are really great tutors who won't be great teachers, and I'm definitely the latter. So I'm never going to be an amazing teacher. I don't have the classroom control. Part of my teaching style is really adapting it to what a child's interest is. You can't do that when there's 30 people. No. It's just not possible.
There's nothing scarier for me than standing up in front of 30 kids. I keep getting asked to go and speak in schools, and I'm like, I'd rather gouge my eyes out. I literally can't think of anything more scary than
I do some bits with schools. When you're external, it's a lot nicer.
Oh, so I don't know. They're mean, kids are.
They're not when you're from outside. When you're an outsider, they're really polite and really lovely. It's when you work for them that they'll do everything.
Yeah. Cool. Well, but you've probably got to a good point now then, because you've sort of like done a fair amount in your career, considering sort of we're still probably in our 20s, and now starting to get a feel for what you might want to do. Having
eventually
things and decided you didn't want to do them, but it's more like, for you, process of elimination rather than
yes. And along the way I picked up a lot of skills, so that I could really just go into it. I mean, by the time I'd finished the PGCE, during the PGCE I was also traveling, so every holiday I was flying out to clients. So I knew that international tuition was something I was going to do. I had it booked. I did my Easter in Dubai again, and it was something I was doing alongside the PGCE, so that it was very much the way I was going to go once I'd finished.
So we've talked obviously about the reasons why you like the tutoring rather than the teaching, because you've got the one-on-one, you can adapt, all the rest, get to know who you're teaching. There must be challenges though doing the private tutoring side of things, because you've got the parents much more heavily involved than you do at a school.
Yes.
And you think, right, who's worse, kids or parents? And that's got to be a fine line.
There's a lot of demand put on a private tutor, especially in the types of roles that I take, which is getting a child to a specific school in the UK. So working with expat families or working with international families, we'll select the school, we'll target the school, we'll do the preparation for it. That pretty much sits on your head because they're not doing it at school. So there's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of responsibility that's put on the tutor who is helping them navigate that path. And there are some points where that child won't get that place, and it's about clear communication and making sure that they're aware of that before we hit that point. So that's probably one of the big things is that the parents expect a lot in terms of results on both ends of the spectrum, because I also do Oxbridge, so there's a lot of expectation. And then the other one is so in my tuition I do some stuff online that is one-to-one, that's just 1 hour lessons, but my holidays are all international. So again, I only work with probably 3 or 4 families in the holidays, and the reason for that is that they want my time. So I'm booked up for the next 2 years, and trying to explain that, during the holidays, because I have families who are taking exams, and those exams might be next year, they might be the year beyond. So trying to explain that to a family and to say, actually, I'm not available. I'm not available in Easter, I'm not available in February, I'm not available in summer, because those are booked. Or if they're not booked, I'm spending them at home with my family. I mean, the year before last, I flew out the Boxing Day. Boxing Day, I flew out to go and join a family in the US. So that is quite a lot of pressure on my time, but also quite a hard thing for some of my clients to understand is that I'm booked.
Especially clients of this nature who are used to being able to get a service they require at whatever price. Oh my God. So firstly, how bloody stressful, because it's pretty much your exam as much as their exam, and will reflect on you, surely, the outcome of the exam, which can sometimes probably go really well, but you're not a bloody miracle worker. There must be so many parents that assume their kids are geniuses and can get into the school. So say, for example, a kid's got an exam coming up and you're parachuted in to support, how far before the exam are you brought in?
Well, it depends on how quickly they've realised that they need a tutor. I can work intensively. I worked with a student intensively for 3 months when they realised that they needed to go to the UK, and that was from the US. So that's a completely different education system to our exams, and we needed that intensive period. Likewise, sometimes I do 1 weeks, but they're usually at prep school. So they're at prep school, they know they're going along, they want somebody who's going to manage the time. Or what I found actually more commonly sometimes is that some students are now taken out of school for the last term, and they'll work with tutors or a team of tutors just to ensure that they are then sufficiently prepared. So those are the typical options. Obviously, the earlier you start, the easier it is, because that intensive period, it can be really intensive.
It can't be like, right, crap, got an exam next Wednesday. I haven't done any revision. We've got 3 days. You can't do much of that.
No, I have done the entire AS syllabus in a week for 1 A level, it was in Turkey. It was very intense, but the student was really motivated, and that's what makes the biggest difference. So we sat down for 4 or 5 hours every day for a week, and she raised her grade by two grades. So she went from a C to an A, which, for a week's worth of work is great, but really motivated, really on board. Actually, a lot of the stuff that we had to deal with was memory. It was kind of it's easier to do than meeting a student who doesn't really want to do it, or who doesn't understand, because often with the 11 plus or the 13 plus, they don't necessarily fully grasp the amount of exams that they have to do. And the 13 plus is hard, especially if you're doing a 13 plus or a scholarship, and they've been preparing, but maybe they haven't fully been preparing. So getting into that routine, it can be quite hard with younger ones. I say younger, 11, because I don't really work with much below kind of 10. So
but that must be the hardest thing, because you can only teach as much as they're willing to learn, obviously. And the last thing kids want to do is tutoring, like aside from school and stuff.
It depends on the student. Some students are really motivated, and also with tuition, I try and make it fun. So there will be points that we will do baking to learn ratio, or we will do a specific science experiment so that they remember it. But ultimately, it's exam prep. So you've got to do exam papers, you've got to do timing practice, you have to do the specification that you're set. There isn't that much wiggle room. There's some of it that you can bring practically to life, and there's some of it that you can do in really innovative, interesting ways. And I like doing that because it's more interesting than sitting and doing a book, but you've got to get it done. So that's all about relationship for me. If we can form a great relationship, they can trust me that I'll get it done. I can trust them that they'll put the work in. Then it's easier.
So you get to the point where you're mega in demand, you're booked up. Is that where the idea of setting up an agency yourself came from?
Yeah, very much.
You needed more of you.
Yes. Yeah. I needed more of me, and I needed in other subject areas because, as I mentioned, I'm dyslexic. So I do not teach English unless it is exam English, because exam English follows a pattern and a formula. So that's easy enough to do for 11 plus, 13 plus. But when you get beyond that, GCSEs, and I had people coming to me saying, I really need to do French GCSE speaking practice. And I go, well, I can't help with that because I did French GCSE, but I wasn't very good at it. And I got an A, but that was because I learnt the mark scheme. So I needed people who could help my students to really to get really high grades. And I needed people who were experts in their field.
Yeah. And so how long has it been going for, the Education Hotel, and sort of where are you at? What services do you offer?
So we do online tuition, obviously, it's COVID. Outside of COVID times, face-to-face within Oxford and Northwest London now. And we do some residential, but our residential team is very specific because I will only hire someone who's done residential work before, because having done it myself, I know the demands of it. And that means that we're kind of very specific. But we also do a lot of mentoring. So this would be students who are coming to the UK, maybe from a different school, and they need that transition. They don't know how to plan a homework timetable, or just those general study skills. And we're actually just branching out to do university placement and school placement. So the full selection, introduction visits, school tests, acceptance. So that whole program. And then I do some advice calls with parents. So I have with our network of parents, sometimes they, for example, I've got one tomorrow who trying to decide between two schools, and they just need a bit of help and a bit of a sounding board to be able to ask some questions. So then we'll do that advice piece. So it's mainly tuition, that mentoring piece, and then some advice.
And then do you also, I saw somewhere that you, I suppose you just sort of touched on it. Help, I suppose, especially if people are moving to the UK or different countries, helping them find the school. Yes. Do you need to know all the schools for this, though? Do you know quite a lot of the private schools? I assume
so it's, I know them, but I don't personally know them. So within tuition or within tutoring agencies, there is a financial bonus often that's offered by schools for sending a child to that school. We don't follow it. So we don't have those relationships, purely because I want it to be something that's independent and not financially driven. So I have schools that I would recommend, and school head teachers that I know, but no financial arrangement between those, just because for me that means that there might be bias involved. And I'd rather send the child to the best school as opposed to just the school that we have this arrangement with. And as we've developed, we've ended up with a number of students who are not, I suppose, they're not looking at Eton, they're not looking at Westminster Harrow. They are either SEN needs or they are gifted, and so therefore they're looking for a very specific type of school. And funneling them into a standard school just doesn't seem right to me. So I want the school to fit the child. So sometimes that means new schools, and that means that then I will reach out to the school, and sometimes I'll visit the school when we're not in COVID. I'll chat with the head teachers or housemasters and really try and get a feel for it for my client.
Yeah, that's a great service. Do you find it weird that there are still all boys and all girls school, or do you think there's sensible logic to that?
So I went to an all-girls school.
Yeah.
So I went to an all-girls grammar.
Like 20, 30 years on now, or like 10, 20 years on. Like, is it like, I don't know, I assume boys learn differently to girls and they can tailor the style of teaching. Is that the point of it, or?
Yeah, and it both in terms of that and in terms of when you board, the atmosphere is very different between a co-ed boarding and a single-sex boarding school. So there are families that definitely prefer co-ed, and there are families that will prefer single-sex. And I think there are advantages and disadvantages to both. So for me, it's about what fits. And actually, I recently had a student who specifically, it was their choice. They wanted to go to a single sex. They did not want to go to co-ed. They'd been to co-ed before, and they felt like they would learn better if they were boarding and if they were surrounded by same sex. So sometimes it is actually the student's choice. And I think for me, I just take the choices on board and work at providing the best service for them.
Yeah, fair. I suppose I understand with the boarding. Well, I don't know, because in one sense, like, you think, is the point so there's like no distraction or like sexual temptation or anything? But then I think, well, no, because these kids are young. Like, I don't think there's anything.
But also, when you get to 18, you're going into university anyway, so you're going to have that interaction. And I know that there are parents who will choose to, for sixth form, they'll choose to go to co-ed so that their child is exposed to the other gender, and so that they're used to that.
Like social skills you need to learn to like just not interact with the other sex. I don't know. I can imagine parents send their kids to single sex to keep them like stop fooling around with boys. But I just think the girls or boys just come out of it like absolute sex pests and like desperate to like go and like jump on the first boy they can find.
I think it depends. I think it depends on the student. Like, I know that some of my students would prefer to learn with the same gender, and they find that, especially doing GCSEs, boys learn so differently to girls in that regard, and girls are usually perfectionists, and they are usually the ones that are increasing the pressure. And sometimes it's quite nice to be in co-ed because boys will diffuse that pressure, but sometimes if you're in a co-ed boys school, they know how to put the pressure on so that their boys do well. Otherwise, without that, they won't do anything. So it's the same when you tutor. It's about getting the idea of a student and knowing how much you need to push and how much you need to encourage. So for some of my students, I've got to go in and I've got to tell them, no, that's not right. Why are you doing it that way? That's stupid. Some of them I've got to really encourage.
Yeah, I bet. And so how long has Education Hotel been going on for now then?
We're a year and a half in. So actually we started only about half a year before lockdown. It was interesting because also what we were looking at was making connections with schools, and literally the kind of week that we'd got the brochure ready and we were ready to approach COVID, and that was that. And so it's been really interesting because I think most tutors have seen an increase over COVID because online tuition has become really big. And for us, it's about sustaining that. So sustaining the growth that we've had and also keeping the quality that we've got, because unfortunately, COVID has also meant that we've got a large amount of people who are trying to enter the tuition industry who don't have the experience, don't necessarily have the skills. And we really pride ourselves on our quality of tutors. Any tuition agency should, because they are the people who are ultimately your lifeblood. So for us, it's about making sure that we put the right person in front of the right child, but that they are really qualified and that they really know what they're talking about. And that's been something that we've had to do during COVID. And we've got a large number of applications from people who've unfortunately lost their job, but therefore think that tuition is a great stopgap. And that's not necessarily the type of tutor that we want. And in fact, the majority of our tutors will be either full-time tutors or they are teachers and tutors. So they do this, they don't do it as a as a 3-month stopgap because they've lost their job in one area and that they want to re-enter the industry. So yeah, it's been a bit of an interesting time in tuition.
Yeah, I bet. And I assume no international travel's been happening, so all that's had to go online.
Yes. So when the first lockdown came, I'd just come back from Italy, and I was due to fly out to the US probably about a couple of weeks later, and I had pretty much a booked calendar. So all of that got cancelled. I did make it out to Turkey back in October half term for one of my regular clients. It is starting to pick up a bit now, so I'm starting to get stuff booked in, but yeah, everything moved online, and safety was really important. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, hopefully over the course of this year, like, I'd like to think I've just been the forever optimist, honestly. Like, if I listen back to some of my podcasts from last year, like, how ridiculous. I'd be like, oh, we'll be in pubs next week. Not like a year later. But even now I'm thinking, oh yeah, like by April, like, well, everything will be fine. Go on a holiday in May. But I think it'll take the course of the summer, but definitely by the end of the year, I think everyone will be vaccinated by the end of the year if you want it to be. In the UK anyway.
It's interesting because before this, I was saying, oh, I don't want to do any more international work. You know, it's hard, it's stressful, it's really intensive. I live with families when I work, mostly residentially, and you are always there, and you are always turned on, and you are always working, pretty much. So when I eat my meals with clients, and I generally enjoy my time, but I won't drink when I'm working at all. So that's from the moment I land on the plane to the moment I get back on the plane. I know that there are people who see that there's a separation, but for me, it's just the whole thing. The whole thing is work. So I was thinking maybe I wouldn't do it, but it's made me realize that I really do enjoy it. I love it. I do enjoy the travel. So that's something that I want to keep going on.
And online tutoring, I know it's a good like alternative considering, but it can't be as easy as face-to-face tutoring. Not easy, but it's more challenging to keep the kid engaged.
I did with older ones. Okay. So it's a lot easier for me. Okay. I can see that for younger primary, it's harder, but most of my students are 10 or above. So that there for me, that I've always done online alongside residential intensive. I don't tend to do face-to-face in Oxford. I don't tend to do face-to-face in London unless it is with my few intensive families that I deal with, and I deal with like the whole education for them. So like by that point, I know them really, really well. I go to parents' evenings for them. I will do everything. I'll read through the reports. I'll make sure that everything is dealt with. For them, I'll do face-to-face wherever. But everyone else, it tends to be online for me.
Yeah, fair. And so what's been some careers high for you then? So if you were to look back, like where have you been like most like in your element?
I love traveling.
Yeah.
So definitely the ability to travel to places that I wouldn't normally have got to go because of my clients, or travel in ways that I wouldn't normally be able to travel because of my clients. That's been really fun, and I love doing that. I think the biggest thing is getting a child into a school they want to go to. Yeah, or a university.
Kid, when you met them, you thought, this kid ain't got a chance. Like that must be so rewarding.
Yeah, so probably one of my biggest career highs was the student that I had at the US, who I spent 3 months intensively with, because they came from a background that was nowhere near what they needed. Nowhere near. I mean, couldn't do division when I met them. And then all the way through to getting a place in one of the top boarding schools in the UK, and knowing that and I still see them, so I still deal with them. I still attend their parents' evenings. I still deal with their education. I still see them for GCSEs. They're booked in for the rest of the year. But like they will come back to me and go, I remember that from when we were here and we were studying this piece of common entrance. I'll be like, perfect. You can remember that, and you can remember it because of some weird thing that I said at the time, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. So that's nice knowing that they've got to where they want to go. That's great.
Yeah, it must be so rewarding. So anyone that's listening and sort of considering this line of work, what sort of advice would you have for them? Would you would you recommend it? Is there any sort of like things they should be very aware of?
Parent demands.
Uh,
Yeah, parent demands, and it's something that I would always say I can't leave my work behind, because that child's school place is resting on me, and because so much of what I do is based on school places or GCSE results or Oxbridge, there is always an end point. So for my type of tutoring, which is that intensive, probably residential, very surrounding, it's very intense, and that doesn't just mean dealing with the child and then at the end of it writing a report and going away. That means every time I see a workshop happening, I will drop it to one of my students who I know that will be interested in it. And I would say that the relationship is not just with the student, not in the way that you have at a school.
yeah.
So if you're looking at it from a teacher's point of view, you really need to consider the parent. I need to consider, can you cope with that? Because I know that there are some people who really struggle. And also just the timing.
Yeah.
I'm really lucky. My boyfriend is a musician, so he's often out in the evenings, rehearsals, gigs, whatever. He travels. So I'm lucky that it fits my timetable. But for many people, they'll come to me and say, well, I want to tutor between 9 and 3. I go, well, yes, we have international clients, and yes, some of those are available at 1 or available, but you're not going to get a full teaching timetable. You're not going to be able to replace your income by only working those days, unless you are with clients who absolutely love you, or you're homeschooling, or you are, you're doing something really niche. But you have to think about how it impacts your life as well. So every evening I work, and that means that socially I don't do much in the evening, and I've missed things because of that. Just consider those two things. But it is I love it. I love doing what I do. I love both running the education hotel and tutoring. So for me, both is perfect. But there are, like every role, there's the unseen bits that you don't necessarily hear about.
These clients of this level, especially if they've successful like in their own right, and they're used to getting what they want by either working hard themselves, which they've got control over, or buying it. This is so out of their control how their children like succeed, and that must be quite a scary thing for a parent, to have that zero control other than getting good tutors in.
Yeah, and I mean, I've also had the point where I've been offered ridiculous sums of money to do a time that I've said I can't do, or that I've already booked out for somebody else. You have it, and it's about, I believe it's about integrity. So if I have said that to one client, and I've already booked that time out, that is, unfortunately, you didn't get in there quick enough, and I've already booked it, and I'll go back to them and I'll ask, and I will try and work things out. But ultimately, it's about, that's why I only, for me, when I do residential intensive stuff, I only have 3 or 4, because those 3 or 4 are the ones that I will email the moment I am available. And those are the ones that book up my time. And if you expect that I'm going to be available with a week's notice, and you're not one of those 3 or 4, then I'm not going to be. But I have an education agency, so I can definitely provide you with somebody. But sometimes that's not what parents want to hear. They want you, and that's that.
Yeah. This is why it should be nice to people that work for you, because provide a service to you. So you've obviously got your key clients that respect you, and you respect them, and you'll prioritize. And the reason other clients don't have that relationship with you is probably because of the way they treat you, or they treat the process, or all the rest. So be nice to the people that are bloody working for you, and you'll be prioritized. Like, it's not hard. So where do we go from here then for you then? So what's the future hold for you? So like, do you hope to tutor forever? Do you hope to step back from that at some point, or?
So I am stepping back. I am focusing purely on those clients for which I have that long-term relationship, for which I have those multiple hours, and I deal with the whole of their education, purely because it could get to, usually at this point, if GCSEs were coming, I'd be doing a 40-50 hour teaching week, and it's not sustainable. I've done it for the last few years. It's not something I enjoy doing 1 hour with a different student, but I do love being involved with usually a whole family, so 3 children, or I might be involved with a family that's got 1 child, but they're not necessarily in the UK. So I'm taking a step back in terms of not doing so much one-to-one, one-off type stuff, and really focusing on those longer term clients. But it also means that I can put more energy into the education hotel, which that kind of quality of service and being able to speak to me is something that I want to bring forward for our clients as well. So at the moment, every one of our clients gets the opportunity to speak to me whenever it's possible. So they can book a slot in my diary if they've got a question about any of their family. And I want that service to be able to happen, and it can't happen if I'm just continually working. So I've got to take that step back. It's not something I love teaching. It's not something I really want to do, but it's something that I need to do to be able to give that top quality to our existing clients.
Yeah, it's the sad thing is, with anyone that owns a business, and like I obviously don't do the teach, but like a lot of people do like recruit. Most people that are in a recruitment agency started off doing recruiting, and then the recruitment agency grew, and then they brought in recruiters, but then now you end up running a company, but you end up not doing any recruiting, which is the whole point of what you're doing. And so like I don't do any recruitment now, and I absolutely love recruitment, and instead I'm sending invoices and I'm doing marketing and accounts, and this isn't why I got into it really. This is why the podcast has been so good, because I still on a regular basis get to chat to people about what they've been done with their careers, which was interesting. But it does give you options there, and I think it does give you different sort of working week, and at some point you might want to have family of your own, and you'll be able to work it around that and that kind of stuff. So I suppose it's sort of just a natural evolution really. So well, there we go then. I think the education hotel has got like a huge potential. Like the more people that know about it, like it must be such a sought after service. Like there must be everybody that sends their kids to private school must in advance think, shit, I hope they get in. Or not even private, but any and not even that, but any sort of exams coming up, should I say? Any exams coming up, or any and school entrance exams, 11 plus, 13 plus, etc. There must always been an element from the parents, not from the kids, but from the parents thinking, like, have we done everything that we can do to get them in the best chance possible? So like I totally see like such a need for like your services. So yeah, I can imagine anyway. I think especially as the pandemic ends, you're probably going to naturally end up having to do more the education hotel, because I think your inquiries will just increase.
Yeah, that's what we found very recently. So it's got to the point now where I'm at that tipping point. I've got to do it, because otherwise we can't deal with what's coming in. So are you
short tutors at the moment? Like, are you recruiting?
We're always recruiting, but in terms of the number of tutors that we take on, we've got like a 5-step process. So probably less than 20% of them make it through. So that means that we're always looking, but we also have a fairly high cut rate, I suppose, because it's about finding the right person.
So. Yeah, of course. Do you have to watch them teach as part of the interview process?
So it depends. Some actually I know, because of the fact that I'm a tutor, and because of the fact that families sometimes will say, oh, I've got this tutor that works with me, and they'll say to me, you should contact them, because they probably need some more work. Or I've taught with people. I did my PGCE 2 years ago, can't remember. But now those people are coming out of teaching. So I've actually got some of them who work with me. But if it's a completely new person, then they go through kind of pre-checks, and then everyone interviews with me. It's something about I want to be involved, because I want to make sure that when I put the tutor forward for the student, I've spoken to them. And as part of that, sometimes if I feel like I need to see them teach, I will ask them to teach me something, which again it is great, because sometimes, I mean, I don't know everything, and I'm very rarely interviewing a biochemist or someone who teaches my subjects. So yeah, so I will, and I will ask them to teach me something. I won't necessarily tell them, because it's something that you should be able to come up with a 5-minute lesson ultimately, because there's so many times that I've taught an elder sibling, and then the younger siblings come into the room and gone, but I'm stuck on this. And I've gone, okay, and then just had to do it. So I feel like it's something that if you can't do that in that situation, you can't tell me 5 minutes about an A-level piece in biology. You can't tell me some math. You can't tell me some what should I know in order to write a French essay. Then I'm not going to trust you enough to put you in front of my clients. And that's what an agency is. You have to be able to trust.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you touched on earlier, and it's so true. Like, the people that you're sending out to work under your brand is your company.
Yeah.
So like, you're 100% reliant. So if I send out a wrong and chef, which has happened because there's a lot of wrong and chefs out there, then the first person who knows about it is the agency.
Yeah.
Like, there's a situation with the chef, so like, you have to definitely trust them completely, and it's difficult because they're human at the end of the day as well, and you need them to be reliable, but yet they have their own situations that might crop up, and yeah, it's a whole ball game running an agency. That's a whole different podcast.
Yep.
Well, look, I need to stop letting you get on with your day, really. But look, I found that so interesting because we've had earlier in the podcast in season 1, we had a sort of private governess, but that's ever so different, because
very different.
It's a very different role. It's a very different thing to what you do. So, like, this is why I love doing it, because I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that existed. Now I do.
Yeah. I always say to parents, like, I don't do governessing, because any of that personal care, and that's typically why I get older students, because anyone who needs residential and they're not going to take any of that personal care, that's where I come in. Younger, I'm not confident with young kids, and absolute props to people who do governessing, because I couldn't do it. It's a role that I couldn't do, and so that's a very distinct role difference.
Yeah, fair. So yeah, and hopefully, I'm sure there'll be lots of people listening that weren't aware of that either. But really, really good to know that you're there, and really good to sort of hear your story and know what services the Education Hotel offer. I'm pretty sure people listening, like, it's just useful to know that that's there, because they'll have their employers, they'll have their principals, they'll have exams coming up, and it's nice for everybody to have, like, people that they know exist should their principal require it. And so it's always lovely if the principal have a problem and have the house manager go, I've got a solution for that. Like, oh, I do actually have a solution for that. Normally I just say it and I don't, but actually I do. Because I know that Gemma's knocking around. So not that you're ever available, but you'll find someone that is. So
yeah, the Education Hotel is available.
The Education Hotel is available, exactly. Well, thank you very much for coming on and telling us your story.
Thanks for having me.
When this goes out, we will link you, so we will make sure that you are contactable. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, we'll link to you on LinkedIn, and we'll link to the Education Hotel so people can get in touch with you straight away. And to everyone that's been listening, thank you very much for tuning in once again. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, I guess. And as usual, please come and sort of follow us on our socials. If you want to get hold of me directly, or get me on philippa@silverswanrecruitment.com. And as usual, if we can help you from a staffing agency point of view, looking for staff or looking for work, you'll find our website, Silver Swan Recruitment. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Cheers, bye.